People who have had sex with their best friend's parent. How did it go? We passed her around in our fraternity. We have a big parent/alumni weekend every year where we would organize a huge tailgate before a football game. For our non-American friends, tailgates are like big picnics before a sporting event where everyone small talks, eats, and gets irredeemably shit-faced. This happened at a tailgate 4 years ago. So tailgate is going full swing, and everyone's having a good time when I randomly get partnered up with my fraternity brother's mom for a game of beer pong. This mid-40s woman was 3 things: blonde, busty, and a flirty drunk. Let's call her Milfzilla. As the game progressed, she started to get a bit handsy, rubbing my shoulder a little or laughing and giving me a little push. By the end of the game, she had progressed to pinching my ass now and then. Thankfully her son and husband were going full tilt at the flip cup table at the other end of the tailgate, so no one was around to beat my ass. After the game, Milfzilla and I kept talking about stuff. By this point, I was feeling pretty lit myself. Finally, there came a moment when she looked around, the kind of look that a drunk person thinks is discreet but to a less drunk person, looks like someone scoping around to make sure the coast is clear. Satisfied, she steps up close to me and whispers in my ear, asking if I want to find somewhere a little quieter. Her hand brushed my crotch in a purposeful way, and she instantly had my undivided attention. I looked around and saw her husband and son still in the zone over at the flip cup table. Sober me couldn't condone this, but drunk me couldn't care less. We went into the fraternity house. We had one room that was more or less a storage room but the size of a regular bedroom. One of the brothers had left behind a mattress the year before, and it had been lying there in that storage room for months, so I figured he wouldn't care if I put it to good use. As soon as we enter the room, she's all over me. She nearly tears my meat off, getting it out of my pants, and sets about giving me what I think to this day might be the best blow I've ever had. I pull her off me before I can nut, throwing her down on the mattress. We start fucking. With every passing second, her moans and gasps are getting louder, and I'm inching closer to getting caught meat deep in this woman. I can feel myself getting close, and suddenly I can feel her tightening around me. With one final heave, she screams out, "You better tell all your boys about this." After that, the night went pretty well. I got fired for laughing at my boss's disabled daughter. I had been with the company for 3 months and was still on orientation. My job was sales/advertising. Everything was going great, until last week, when we were scheduled to have our quarterly retreat. Since we were the main regional office in the area, all of the employees from the satellite locations came to our office for the retreat. The owner of the company rarely visits our office. He's been overseeing the setup of a new satellite office for the last year, according to my coworkers. But, he was there for the retreat, as was his disabled daughter, Amy. Not her real name, for the sake of privacy. One of my coworkers told me Amy works at one of the satellite offices and I probably wouldn't have much interaction with her, but I should be nice. That seemed like a no-brainer. I'm nice to everyone. Regardless, I won't claim to be an expert on Amy's disability, but it seemed like she had childlike mannerisms and struggled with expressing herself. She also had some problem with motor skills. I'll describe the only interaction I had with her prior to the incident. I went to refill my coffee and Amy was in front of me, getting her coffee. I watched her struggle with getting condiments added and putting the lid on, so I politely asked if she needed any help. She thanked me, said she did, and let me finish making it. While I was making it, she said she hated coffee, but her dad made her drink it because she had to, in a loud voice, always alert. I smiled, said that was definitely important, and handed her the cup. She thanked me again and went back to the office her dad was using, where she had been most of the day. I felt like I had been a good Samaritan and went on my way. Most of the retreat is team building exercises. Prior to the incident, Amy only participated in the puzzle race, where groups put puzzles together without the box art to see which team can finish faster. Amy wasn't in my group, so I didn't have any interaction with her there. Neither of our teams won. The big event, and the one that everyone seemed the most excited for, was the last activity of the day. Our boss gave us a list of potential clients. We were supposed to select 3 as a group, and put together something to attract the customer. We were told we would be judged on our creativity. My group explained that we could do pictures, slogans, jingles, whatever we wanted. Each person expected to work on one individually, then work with their group to polish it up before it was presented to everyone. It was kind of a big deal because at previous retreats, there would be clients on the list the owner was already close to bringing on board, and if you impress the owner, you might just land that account. I went with a jingle, rhymed a few words, and recorded it. It was silly but fit the brand. My group gave me some pointers, we made some improvements, and I recorded the final product for submission. I helped my team with their projects until it was time to turn everything in. After everything was turned in, we gathered in the big conference room to critique each other. The owner went through them one by one. If it was a picture or storyboard, he'd put it up, read it, and we'd make comments, good or bad. There were some that were great which drew a lot of compliments, and some that were really bad, which we laughed about as a group. You could tell the senior account managers didn't care much about the exercise or put much effort into their pitches. Nobody seemed to get upset or offended, regardless of the feedback. When my jingle was played, it got a lot of comments, not all of them good, and I took the feedback with a smile. After getting my feedback, I felt a little more comfortable about sharing my thoughts on other presentations. I gave what I thought was valuable feedback to a few products, laughed at a couple others, and then a rather crude drawing was put up for the exact same company I had chosen. I immediately joked that well, at least my jingle was better than that. Did a 3-year-old draw it? And laughed. to absolute silence. I was really confused because plenty of people had made jokes and everyone laughed. Instead, a few people looked at me like I was disgusting and the owner said, "Well, if you don't have anything nice to say, keep it yourself, maybe?" Then my boss scooted down to where I was sitting and told me I needed to go to my desk. Now, I noticed as I was gathering my things that the owner's daughter was red-faced and starting to tear up. The team building exercise was over for me. I went back to my desk and it began to sink in that the drawing must have been drawn by the owner's daughter. There was no warning or anything. The owner didn't reveal who put together what we were looking at until after a few critiques. Maybe I should have known? Everyone was joking and having fun up to that point. Someone else had a pretty bad drawing that got laughed at. Either way, I felt awful. As soon as the event was over, I approached my boss to apologize. He told me to wait for him in his office. Long story short, I was fired. My boss said since I was still on orientation, he had decided I wasn't a good fit for the company, so it was better to let me go now. He didn't outright say I was being fired for making fun of her drawing, but that's literally the only thing that I've ever gotten in trouble for. My work, up until that point, had been praised. I didn't get much time to process it because my boss had already called security, who showed up fairly quickly, and escorted me to my desk to gather my things before escorting me out of the building. An hour later, I got a call from one of my former teammates, who asked if I wanted to join the team for a drink one last time. They needed it after the retreat, and felt bad that they didn't warn me. I wasn't feeling up for it, but I wanted to try and make sense of the whole situation, so I went to the bar. In the back of my mind, I was thinking that since I'm about to start looking for a new job, a few references from former coworkers wouldn't be bad since I definitely won't be getting one from my boss or the owner of the company after everything that happened. The team explained that Amy comes to all of these retreats, and she always does some crude drawing like that. Everyone just sort of knows to say nice things about it, and move on. One of my teammates said that once you've seen one of her drawings, you know what to look for. Well, I didn't, and nobody warned me. I started to get pretty upset that this was a known thing and everyone knew but me. But what could I do? I had already messed up and it cost me my job. The team also shared more about Amy. Apparently she works at one of the satellite offices but doesn't really do anything. The people in charge of the office try to come up with stuff for her to do because she gets upset when she's bored. The team said the way the people who work there described it, they were basically her babysitter so she wouldn't bother her dad all day when he spent most of his time there. And after he moved on to establish the new satellite office, he didn't take Amy with him because she liked all the friends she had at that office. They also said that her dad had harassed a few single guys at the office to take her on dates, which seemed pretty damn HR inappropriate, but he does own the company. My team said Amy desperately wants a boyfriend and wants to get married, which she talks about all the time. The consensus seemed to be that there's no way she actually understands how relationships or marriage works, and her dad probably put this idea in her head to begin with. One of my teammates did joke that it wasn't a bad deal, because whoever married her would inherit the company since she is the old man's only kid. I wasn't really in the mood for jokes at that point after losing my job over one, so I told them I needed to go. The only good thing is my former team members did say they would gladly give me a reference if I needed it, since they felt so bad about not telling me about the Amy situation to begin with. Oh, and the cherry on top? Amy sent me a Facebook friend request over the weekend. I haven't accepted it. I already upset her and it cost me my job. Part of me wants to accept it, apologize, and block her, but I'm not sure I'm ready for that either. I'm going to take a few days to get myself together and then get my resume out there. What does it feel like to be secretly rich? Around strangers, it's easy. Around friends and neighbors, it's work. Most people in the United States have at least one of my products in their home, and would instantly recognize the company, but they wouldn't know me. There's never a random "Hey, aren't you the CEO of?" on the street, or checking into a hotel, so that part is fairly easy. On the flip side, I think I've done a pretty good job of keeping things on the down low among friends. I personally bring home about $4 million a year, but I'm not really into displays of wealth, not because I'm actively hiding anything. I just think most of that stuff is kind of tacky and isn't interesting. Our house isn't over the top. It's larger than average, but we also have 3 kids, so that's expected. It does sit on 60 acres, but we tell people only 5 of those acres are ours. We have a couple of cars, her primary, my primary, a truck, and a couple of classics in the garage, but all are American made and none newer than 5 years old. Both of the classics are actually pretty rare cars which would fetch over $100,000 a piece if I ever sold them. But since I'm also known for being kind of a gearhead and did a lot of work on it myself, everyone just assumes they were once junkers I brought back from the dead or aren't all original parts. This part is pretty easy since there visibly aren't too many cues that would tip someone off. Everything was paid for with cash, including the house, but realistically outside of the land value, someone making $150K, $200K could afford all of the same stuff if they financed/mortgaged it. The main difficulty is trying to relate and being careful what I say. Most of our friends are in that $150, $200K range, but they're in debt up to their eyeballs to maintain their lifestyles. They're driving new leased Mercedes and BMWs and probably think they're doing better than I am financially, which is fine by me. It's just little things I have to watch out for. A buddy invited me to bring one of the classics to a car show he was going to once, but I declined and said it acting up and I needed to work on it. I left the hood up for a week in case he came over. Really, I just didn't want the attention. Someone there would have recognized it for what it was. Occasionally when someone notices how much land surrounds my house, I'll say something like I hope the owner never decides to build on it. Before we take a family trip, I will mention that I'm saving up for it a couple months prior, when really we could just go. I also own property in other states that no one knows about. One of them is a place along a river in Tennessee, and a few of us are going down there next month to witness the eclipse. They think it's just a place I rented for the weekend. Honestly, I don't like the deception. These are good friends, but seeing how they all are with their money and how they regard it, I don't want them to know the truth. I hear about all of their money problems and how they talk about other people who are better off than they are, and there's a lot of disdain and jealousy there. It's just not worth the hassle. The problem is I think most of the people I've met in my own income bracket and higher are pretentious douchebags, so I don't really want to hang out with them either. My life doesn't revolve around money, and that isn't the case for most of the people I've met with an income over $1 million, so I don't really relate to them. I would rather vacation to a rustic cabin in the woods than some flashy 5-star resort. What are some things that look harmless during the day, but get insanely creepy during the night? Good people sometimes pick up hitchhikers in the middle of the night. You see, one time a few years ago I had gone to a concert with my girlfriend, and sometime in the middle of the show she disappeared. Eventually she came back with some guy who I had never met but she was obviously very close with. The show ends and my girl asks me if it would be alright if we gave her friend a ride home. Sure, I said that shouldn't be a problem despite the fact she had ditched me for this random guy at the show. Well, we get to the guy's house and she asks if it would be cool if we had a few drinks together. I told her I wanted to go, but she convinced me to stay. Eventually the two of them go inside to get something and don't come back out. After 15 or 20 minutes I go inside looking for them and can't find them anywhere. I look for a while before deciding flock it, she is obviously cheating on me with this guy, and so I leave. My phone was dead. It was around 2:30 in the morning. I had no idea where I was, and so naturally I started walking. After about an hour of walking I finally recognized a landmark and realized I had been walking in the opposite direction from my house. Disappointed, sad, quite drunk, newly single, and alone, I turn around and start walking the other way. My feet started to hurt after a number of miles. I was starting to cry a bit, and so I decide I would hitchhike when I saw the occasional car. A number of cars pass without stopping, but soon enough a car pulls over for me. Thank God, but who the flock is willing to pick up a hitchhiker at this time, I wondered? It turns out it was two high school kids pulling an all-nighter after a party and who thought I looked like I needed help. I told them about how shitty my night was and they told me they would cheer me up. We ended up driving around until 5 or 6 a.m. smoking weed and freestyle rapping to beats that one of them made. They taught me all about how to let rhymes fly and told me I was a natural. We were telling jokes and stories and laughing and having a hella good time. They gave me a ride to my house when the sun started to come up, and in return I gave them a decent bit of weed. I forgot all about the girl until the next day when I woke up and turned my phone back on, but I will never forget those two guys who helped me get home safely. I started dating my wife when she was 13. My wife, now 27, and I, 37, have been married happily for about 5 years, but our relationship began when she was 13 and I was 23. We are still deeply in love with each other and we don't regret the past. Once I graduated from university, I immediately moved overseas to complete my master's and also found a small teaching position at one of the more competitive middle schools in the city where I was studying. I taught English initially and eventually history once I had learned the language well enough. I also tutored on the side so I could have some travel money. For the sake of anonymity, I'll call my wife Lily. During the winter of my first year teaching, she transferred to my English class. Admittedly, she was an adorable kid at the time, yet my feelings for her were limited to the admiration a teacher naturally has for their students. One day towards the end of the school year, Lily and her mother came and found me after school to ask if I could tutor Lily privately. As I needed the money and Lily was so fun to teach, I accepted and we began classes that summer. Over the next year I seemed to become a part of the family. Besides simply tutoring Lily, they would invite me out to dinners, short outings around the city and so on. At first it was overwhelming and I tried to politely decline their invitations as it seemed to surpass what would be appropriate under most circumstances, but they were relentless. Her parents' trust in me became almost absolute. I must have been charismatic at that age, because I made no conscious effort to appease them. They would occasionally be absent during our lessons, so Lily and I spent a fair amount of time alone. We would mostly stick to the material I prepared, but sometimes we would both get bored with it and talk casually. Naturally, we became close and comfortable with one another. Months went by and I started feeling a strong connection with her. We bonded over many things: paintings, music, novels and attitudes towards life. Her entire outlook was well beyond her age. At first, I told myself it was a sort of elderly brother's care that I was feeling or a fatherly instinct, but I was clearly in denial that I could be attracted to someone so young. One evening we got on the topic of cooking and it turned out she had never learned to cook anything before. So, I thought it would be a great opportunity to teach her vocabulary for a new setting. We went into the kitchen and I taught her to make scrambled eggs. She was doing a poor job of stirring, so I tried to take the spatula away from her, but she insisted on doing it herself. So I stood behind her and guided her hand in the proper motion. Then, spatula still in hand, and for no reason other than that we were particularly close to each other, she turned around in my arms and kissed me. Deeply. I was too shocked to do anything and just accepted it. We stood like that for a few more seconds, kissing slowly, then I came to and pulled away. She immediately began apologizing as apparently I had a very concerned look on my face. I remember saying some nonsense about student-teacher relationships and that I was too old for her, or she would meet someone her own age soon, but to my surprise I had enjoyed it very much despite simultaneously feeling very guilty about the whole thing. I told myself I should have kept our relationship more professional, but looking back I don't think anyone can really say there was anything unhealthy about it. Going against my instincts, I brought myself to acknowledge my feelings for her. At our next lesson I told her that I was in fact attracted to her and willing to see if we could get away with it. At the same time I remember considering why society looks down on the whole thing, and I agreed with that concern in principle. Someone of that age is too easy to manipulate and can often be too scared to speak up when they feel uncomfortable. I didn't want to harm her and knew that in having a relationship with her, the risk was high. So I told her that she had complete power over where things went. If at any moment she wanted out, all she had to do was tell me. Now, let me say that before her, almost all of my previous relationships had been with older women and I had never been attracted to anyone underage before, needless to say a middle school girl. I know that when I fell in love with her it wasn't just some disgusting attraction. I really adored her for who she was. The lessons continued as before, but after a while we would take advantage of the time alone to fool around a bit. She went on to high school, then once she was in college we started openly dating. Finally, we married soon after she had finished university. Since then we have both been successful in our careers. I am a professor and she's currently getting her doctorate. There are only a few people in our social circle who know our relationship started that early, and to my surprise most of them haven't anything negative to say about it. But at the same time I know that if most people knew about it, we, and I especially, would be looked down upon. I don't feel guilty, but I am bothered that we have to lie or feel embarrassed about our history because really, we both find it very romantic. I would never encourage people to actively seek these kinds of relationships, and I think pedophilia is a serious mental illness. Anyone who intentionally preys on children should be apprehended. But in cases like ours people need to be reminded that there are gray areas out there, and what our judgment comes down to should ultimately be the way people treat each other. I really want to know what people think about a relationship like ours. Whether you want to criticize or support us, please explain why you feel the way you do and what moral framework you are coming from. I am also willing to answer serious questions. My PP is too big and I hate it. My PP is so large I just cannot lug it around any longer. It is so insanely huge and has caused so many problems in my life. I cannot go to airports as they think I'm sneaking something in. So every time I go, I get touched as they try to take my PP off thinking it's a bomb. I cannot pleasure women as they are so horrified at the sight of my PP, that they immediately run away. My mother and father disown me after seeing the length of my shaft. Not only is it extraordinarily long, it is just too thick. I cannot relieve myself as my hands are just too small to choke the chicken. My humongous PP has ruined my life. I resent God for cursing me with this large chunk of meat that just drags across the ground. Doctors tell me I will never be able to get a PP reduction as they would have nowhere to put the PP. It would just take up far too much room. I had a girlfriend when I was a young lad. She loved me for who I was and did not care for this deformity, but one day, I took off my jeans and my PP flung out, smacking her and flinging her out the window. She died 2 hours later in the hospital. She was the only woman who ever loved me. My PP is just too ginormous. It has caused problems for myself and the people around me. For this reason, I will be ending it all. My pee has taken over my life. But it cannot take over a life that does not exist. What did you find while snooping that you wish you had never found? A girl who I was madly in love with had told me she wanted to cool off our relationship because we were long distance and she wanted to focus on her final year of university. I was 27 and she was 24. I was trying to understand things, though of course very hurt about her unwillingness to try things more seriously between us. Her character was great, down to earth and easygoing. She was perfect for me. Similar humor, easy flowing conversation, and great intimacy. But there was only one thing I didn't like. She had a best friend, a guy who I knew with certainty was into her. We'd argued about it before, but she said they were just friends and it was his problem if he still had romantic feelings for her. I trusted her as best as I could with this issue. It annoyed me just how much time they'd spend together. She acted like my jealousy was all just stupid male paranoia that I had to do my best to deal with alone. So anyway, it was around the time she'd told me of her desire to cool things off. She was taking a shower. Her phone went off and a message showed on the screen. It was from him. The message wasn't downright incriminating, but it seemed fishy. I unlocked her phone and had a look. This is the point when snooping led me to a thing I wish I'd never found. I discovered a whole conversation which basically spelled out her feelings for him. She'd said things like, "I love you. Please don't be angry. I'll be back soon. I hate this place. And worst of all, his dogs are horrible and ugly." I don't know why, but this crushed me. I never expected this from this girl. Not only had I discovered she was secretly in love with the best friend who I'd always suspected, but she also had the audacity to say that my two fantastic Staffordshire Bull Terriers were ugly. It was one of those comments that she probably didn't even mean with sincerity. She was just adding more negatives to reassure the guy that she hated being at my house and wanted to leave as soon as possible to get back to him. It broke me. Took me almost 2 years to feel okay about romantic relationships again.
As of Reddit, what do girls do that is very cute but they don't know it? When they sit in a chair that's just a little too big to be comfortable in, so they pull their legs up in front of them. I think it's number 4 on that one chart that's always floating around. Girls tying their hair back when they're about to do something. I think this is the female equivalent of a man rolling up the long sleeves on his shirt. As a girl, I can confirm, when a guy rolls up his sleeves, it's weirdly cute. Whenever my girlfriend tries to get my attention she tugs at my shirt sleeve and says, "Boyfriend, boyfriend." I guess it sounds weird but I think it's the cutest thing in the world. I love it when a girl stretches. Just a yawn and a stretch in the morning does it. When they continually tap on your shoulder to tell you something or when their eyes spark up when you see them after a long time. That's really cute. Makes you feel wanted. My girlfriend can't wink very well, and so if I wink at her she has to try winking back, which results in a wink war consisting of her blinking aggressively at me and me laughing and winking back. The way most of them giggle. I don't know what it is, but when you hear a woman genuinely giggle, it's warming on the inside. I've infiltrated and am learning the secrets of being cute.
Friends of killers, how did you react after finding out what they did? I knew something had happened. He was way quieter than he usually was. He kept zoning out or staring into space. For context, it was an accident, but he was scared and covered it up. Not very well though, because the cops found the body. He was suspiciously invested in the case. I was actually with him watching TV when the news announced they had found the body. He started sobbing and I was like, dude, did you know her? But he brushed it off, saying it's just really sad that family lost their grandma. I chalked it up to him losing his own grandma a month or two prior. It didn't even occur to me that it happened like 2 miles from his house. He was doing a bad job at work, we worked together, and kept getting distracted. When the police showed up at our work, they came over to him and said they had some questions to ask, and they didn't even get another word out before he collapsed, started bawling his eyes out and spilled out everything that happened. He confessed everything right there on the shop floor. It would later come out that he'd written a 2-part apology letter and put it in a Ziploc bag and gone back to leave it with the body. They asked the front office for a document with his handwriting on it and it was a perfect match. There was damage to the front of his pickup along with DNA in the bumper. The family understood it was an accident and did feel sorry for him. He got off with a couple of years in prison, which he only served half of. When he got out, the first thing he did was have his pickup destroyed at a junkyard. He said he couldn't bear to look at anything from that night. Sadly, this would bear true as he ended himself just a few months later. The family had forgiven him and were actually one of the last people he called before doing it. He wasn't a bad guy, it was just a tragic accident that ended up eating him alive. People who have been caught having a fun time by their parents. What happened afterwards? Got caught banging my best friend's stepsister in her car, in the driveway when I was 17. It was my grandmother that caught us. We were parked under a bright SHPS light that was on the front of my granddad's shop, with the door open, like the stupid, horny teens we were. I'm going to town, and I hear a smack on the windshield. My grandma is standing there with a furious look on her face, and screams at the top of her lungs, just what the hell are you doing? I look up with what I can only guess is a horrified and confused look on my face, with my neon white ass exposed, and say, what the hell does it look like I'm doing? I pull out, and sprint to the house, jump in my bed and pull the covers over my head. Needless to say, there was a very awkward breakfast the next morning. A few months later, I'm on my way out the door to take the same girl to prom, and she hands me a few 20s wrapped around a strip of rubbers. She looks me in the eyes, smiles a big toothy grin, and says, now, don't spend it all in one place, son. My grandma is a effing legend. The one day I overslept saved my life. I was in 3rd grade. One day I was awoken by my mom in a rush. She had overslept, and since she always woke me up in the morning, this meant that I too overslept, and now there was just no way I was going to be ready for school early enough to get on the school bus. School started at 8 a.m., and my bus pickup time was 7 a.m., but it was already like 6:40 or something, and I was still in my pajamas and hadn't even had breakfast yet. So mom decided that today, we would just tell the bus driver to go on ahead, and she would take me to school, which would give me plenty of time to get ready. So I'm sitting there at the dining room table eating breakfast, still in my pajamas, and it's now about 6:50. We hear the bus pull up, about 10 minutes earlier than usual. My mom peeks her head out of the door, into the foggy morning, and waves the bus on. She closes the door and comes back inside, but the bus doesn't pull away. There's a knock at the door, and mom opens it to find a man in a bus driver's uniform. He explains that he's a substitute driver, because the regular driver called in sick. He says he knows he's a few minutes early, since he wanted to get an early start on the route since he didn't know it well. Mom explained to him that she was going to take me to school since we woke up late. He gets visibly upset, and says that he can wait a few minutes since he's already running ahead of schedule. My mom insists that no, I won't be ready to go in a few minutes, and tells him to go on ahead. He seemed angry about this, and yelled at mom for a few sentences along the line of her not trusting him and that I should wake up on time. But eventually turned around and got back in the bus and left. Mom thought it was odd, but just assumed that the guy had never done bus driving before. I returned to eating my breakfast, and still don't have my school clothes on at this point. But at 7 a.m. sharp, another bus pulls up to my house. Mom thinks this is really weird and goes outside to talk to them. She comes back inside looking terrified, but doesn't really say anything about it and tells me to finish getting ready for school. At the time, I didn't know what happened, but mom ended up telling me a few years later. When she went to the second bus, she found that it was being driven by my regular bus driver, and it was full of all the other kids that are usually on the route. The other bus was empty. Mom asks the driver about the substitute driver and about him calling in sick. I never called in sick. There is no substitute driver on my route, he says. The driver immediately called dispatch in a panic and told my mom to go inside and call the police and report this incident. There was absolutely no one doing my driver's route that day. Whoever this was most likely a kidnapper who had targeted me. I never heard anything about it again. Not even if someone else had ended up being picked up by this mysterious fake bus driver. But chances are, had I gotten on that bus, I would have never made it to school, or back home. And if mom hadn't overslept on that specific day, I would have been on that bus. Who is the worst person you know? When I was in high school, I worked at a restaurant with a girl involved in a rehab program, which only allowed her to go out for a certain time every day. She was also 17. She couldn't drive or have her own cell phone, so she had a designated driver from the rehab that would pick up and drop her off at specific times. Apparently, her driver is a weirdo and groomer, and he wouldn't stop bothering her and has offered her money for sex many times and even asked her to run away with him. One day when I was at work, this old-looking bald guy, who was the driver guy as she told me later, came inside desperately wanting to see her. She went hiding and tells me to tell the guy to leave and that she was not there, which I did. He went off after hearing that. Then he tries to brute force his way but failed miserably. He left after not too long, but left a message on a napkin for her before he left. I read the message, and I clearly remember it. I need an answer now. I'm offering you $1,500 to run away with me. If not, I'm coming to get you myself. Don't say I didn't warn you. I gave it to her. She didn't read it, and threw it in the trash right away. A few days later, the girl quits without notice. From what I heard, she went to a different rehab. After she left, the guy would show up around 10 a.m. every day at the restaurant looking for her, and I kept warning the guy to leave. He eventually stopped after a few weeks. The guy was definitely a groomer, as she's not the only victim. Apparently, 2 more girls who are minors were facing the same issue as my coworker. After the reports, he was fired from the rehab as a driver and they pressed him for sexual misconduct with a minor, child exploitation, and possession of child sex videos. What is one thing that all men hate? I don't speak for all men, of course, no one does, but for most of the men I know, one thing we really hate is being confronted with conversation the instant we walk into a place. We hate it even more if the conversation is actually just informing us of something we have to do. We hate it the most if the conversation is actually just criticism. The instant we walk into a place also includes the moment we wake up. Often, when I get home, I sit in my van for a few minutes before walking into my house. This is because I know that, as soon as I walk through that door, someone in that house is going to walk to talk to me. It's always a good talk they want to have with me, like my wife asking me how my day was, or my kids telling me about their day. I'm not complaining about having people who love me and are excited to have me home so they can talk to me. I'm just saying that, if I go straight from driving to trying to talk to someone, without a few moments of quiet transition time in between, there is a good chance that I will get annoyed by being confronted with talking as soon as I walked into the place. I don't want that annoyance to come across as lack of interest in what they're saying. I don't want them to take it personally. I just need some transition time between places. This applies at work as well. Want to ruin my morning? Walk into the building at the same time I do in the morning, and start talking to me as we walk in together. If you follow me into my classroom to continue the conversation, I will be especially annoyed with you. The reason, for me at least, is that, to my mind, conversing with someone falls under the chore group, right there between doing the laundry and planning the meals. I don't mind doing those chores. In fact, I find doing them satisfying. But not as soon as I walk into the place, or wake up in the morning. Women, if you're the kind of person who starts talking to your man the moment he walks into the house, try giving him a few minutes to transition/decompress before talking to him. See if you notice a difference in his mood or in his ability to hold a conversation, once he's had a few moments to himself. You might be pleasantly surprised by the positive change just a few minutes of quiet when returning home can give to your man. Needless to say, if you're meeting him at the door by telling him a task he needs to complete, or criticizing him, just cut that out. Nobody likes someone who does that. 2 weeks ago I effed my daughter's friend, genuinely feeling anxious every day. My daughter has a very pretty 21-year-old friend. Before all of this happened, I remember thinking to myself if I was younger, I'd totally date her. She's my type, blonde, tall, cute face, kind etc. She's always been very nice to me, but suddenly she actually started teasing me. She started calling me daddy over text. She said your daughter is so lucky, I wish you were my daddy. She texted me at night to ask me a question. It was an excuse. Of course, I replied to the question, but she kept the conversation going. She said I'm in bed right now but can't sleep. Honestly, I'd totally want a hug. To keep it short, I couldn't keep it in my pants. I'm really not an excited dude drooling over young girls. My daughter has 7 to 8 close friends I see regularly. She's the only one I find pretty, because she really is pretty, and I simply couldn't resist. I'm divorced. I started seeing someone else 2 months ago, but I wouldn't call that cheating since we aren't clearly a couple yet. I'm just anxious because I wouldn't want my daughter to find out. Yesterday she suddenly said we need to talk and it scared the heck out of me. Basically every time I see her I'm like I hope she hasn't found out. I hope she hasn't found out. I hope she hasn't found out. What disturbing rumor turned out to be true at your school? When I was a senior in high school, we had a new teacher join the faculty to teach health and home economics. She was probably about 26 years old and very, very attractive. Everyone was talking about the hot new teacher. As I was senior class president, I needed a new faculty advisor since my previous advisor of 3 years retired at the end of my junior year. About 2 weeks later the principal called me into his office and informed me that the new hot teacher was going to be our new class advisor for the rest of the year. As a result, she and I spent a lot of time together, at school and off campus, organizing and running myriad events to raise money for the class, plan the prom, field trips etc. Soon, the rumors started flying around that she and I were messing around. This was completely false. I can say she never acted inappropriately towards me or suggested anything to make me think she had plans for any type of physical or sexual activity. She was a fantastic advisor and always just that, a class advisor. I spent the rest of the year denying these rumors with friends, with teachers and with parents. I was even interrogated by my wrestling coach the day before the district championship match. She and I had a laugh about it at graduation as she had to face similar questions from other faculty as well as the principal. She confided in me that she had tendered her resignation, but the principal would not accept it and said he believed her and would ensure the rumor was squashed. So I graduated and left for my plebe year at West Point, forgetting about the entire situation. At West Point, the first year is called plebe year rather than freshman year. The first semester of my plebe year was moving along as it should, with no unusual events worth mentioning until the final month. Then, in early December, the topic of my high school faculty advisor resurfaced. One night when I was studying, there was a knock on my door and the company tactical officer, a regular Army captain, walked in and told me to report to his office immediately as there was a phone call for me from the Dover Police Department. Now, I immediately assumed it was my brother playing some kind of twisted joke on me since he was a captain in the very same police department waiting for me on the phone. Since my TAC was standing right behind me, I answered the phone as we were taught. "Cadet Kerwick speaking, how may I help you, sir/ma'am?" I immediately recognized the voice on the other end. It was not my brother but a close friend I had grown up with and known for over 15 years. He said, "What did you find while snooping that you wish you had never found?" A girl who I was madly in love with had told me she wanted to cool off our relationship because we were long distance and she wanted to focus on her final year of university. I was 27 and she was 24. I was trying to understand things, though of course very hurt about her unwillingness to try things more seriously between us. Her character was great, down to earth and easygoing. She was perfect for me. Similar humor, easy flowing conversation, and great intimacy. But there was only one thing I didn't like. She had a best friend, a guy who I knew with certainty was into her. We'd argued about it before, but she said they were just friends and it was his problem if he still had romantic feelings for her. I trusted her as best as I could with this issue. It annoyed me just how much time they'd spent together. She acted like my jealousy was all just stupid male paranoia that I had to do my best to deal with alone. So anyway, it was around the time she'd told me of her desire to cool things off. She was taking a shower. Her phone went off and a message showed on the screen. It was from him. The message wasn't downright incriminating, but it seemed fishy. I unlocked her phone and had a look. This is the point when snooping led me to a thing I wish I'd never found. I discovered a whole conversation which basically spelled out her feelings for him. She'd said things like, "I love you. Please don't be angry. I'll be back soon. I hate this place. And worst of all, his dogs are horrible and ugly. I don't know why, but this crushed me. I never expected this from this girl." Not only had I discovered she was secretly in love with the best friend who I'd always suspected, but she also had the audacity to say that my two fantastic Staffordshire Bull Terriers were ugly. It was one of those comments that she probably didn't even mean with sincerity. She was just adding more negatives to reassure the guy that she hated being at my house and wanted to leave as soon as possible to get back to him. It broke me. Took me almost 2 years to feel okay about romantic relationships again.
My 15-year-old son is perverted. Help me. Please. I don't know where it all went wrong. I thought I had done a good job of raising my boy. That was until I started noticing a change in his behavior towards me. He started to look at me with a sense of lust, and I very quickly became uncomfortable. The perverted glances he cast in my direction made my skin crawl. It evoked the same sensation as an unwelcomed gaze that lingers on your body. Almost like when you know a guy is staring at you in your body with disturbing intentions. My fears were solidified when I caught him looking at my bum and breasts. I felt betrayed and disturbed. How could my own flesh and blood, my son, dare to objectify me in such a way? Despite my mounting discomfort, I chose to remain silent, hoping against hope that this aberrant behavior would pass. Yet, the situation escalated further. My son began resorting to deceptive tactics. He started to pretend to accidentally touch my bum and breasts by fake falling or other things. I knew he was doing it on purpose, but I didn't say or do anything. Still, I dismissed it as a phase or even a figment of my imagination. Deep down, I knew the truth, but denial held me captive, hindering my ability to confront the horrifying reality. His behavior continued to worsen. One night, as I prepared for bed, I put on what I usually sleep in, my tank top and underwear. Soon after, I laid down and fell asleep. A few hours later, I heard the sound of an iPhone when it took a picture. Startled, I woke up. That was when I found my son touching and taking pictures of my butt while I was sleeping. Fury and anguish surged within me, fueled by a profound sense of violation. I finally confronted him. I took, and when I went through it, what I saw shattered my heart into irreparable fragments. Each session yielded a sickening collection of nearly 100 photographs, capturing me, exposed and vulnerable, in my own home. They were all pictures of me in my underwear. I shuddered to imagine what sinister purposes these images might have served. I deleted all the photos and gave him the consent talk and how incest is wrong. He stopped for a while. However, soon after I caught him in something worse. The conversation hadn't been enough. A week later, I had been showering when I noticed my bathroom door slightly opened. Through the silhouette of darkness, I could see one white eye peeking through the door, accompanied by a small Polaroid camera. I ran out of the shower and destroyed it. Fearing for who he may have exposed these pictures to, I searched his room. Under his bed, I found a collection of printed Polaroid pictures. This time they were all pictures of me naked. Hoping to God that he hadn't handed any of them out, I threw the pictures in my fireplace. For now, I've been sending him to a therapist. Despite trying to repair our relationships, I can no longer look at him the same. I'm considering sending him away, either to his dad or some facility to help him. I don't know what to do anymore.
What are some dumbest psychology tricks that actually work? Part 1. 1. Compliment someone's eyes when you first meet. By doing so, you're going to force the person to look at your eyes a brief moment, but it would be enough for that person to notice you, when before it could have been a polite gesture. 2. Still, in the first impression moments, use the first name of the person straight away. By doing so, you're connected with more intimacy. 3. And when talking with that new person, ask a question and stay silent until you have a full answer. People really can't stand the noiseless gap and will talk much more than what they intended. 4. Asking someone to do you a favor makes him like you more. 5. If you do not move for 15 minutes without a purpose, you will fall asleep. 6. Doing things that scares you will make you happier. 7. Our brain automatically associates smile and happiness. If we force ourselves to smile, our brain will assume that we are happy. 8. People can recognize the smile at a maximum distance of 100 meters, making it the most recognizable facial expression. 9. People are more likely to return a lost wallet if they find a baby picture inside. 10. A person's memory is able to save 90% of what he does, 50% of what he sees and 10% of what he hears. 11. If you want to say no to drinks offers, just tell them that you just took medicine. 12. The women's mind has the ability to detect and feel the danger. If your guts tell you that something is wrong, never ignore that. 13. If you announce your goals to others, you will be less likely to succeed. Studies show that you lose your motivation. 14. Convincing yourself that you have slept well encourages your brain to think it was the case. What is the creepiest thing you have ever done? So I have lived next door to a very attractive girl just about my whole life, Anna. We're the same age and everything, so we grew up to become really good friends. Now Anna's a pretty attractive girl, but had had a boyfriend since about freshman year, so I never really got past being friends. But I could sense their relationship was a little off, so I brushed it off. Of course, her being so attractive had the girl next door effect, and I always had a huge crush on her even when I hung out with her. Now, we had hung out quite a bit, and over the time I had learned her garage door code to get inside. One day in junior year I decided to stay home from school because I had a pretty lenient mom and just didn't want to go. By about 12 that day I was extremely bored and intoxicated, and was trying to think of some things to do. I realized that her dad had a whole fridge of beer out in their garage, so I figured I could just go into there real quick, grab a few beers and have a good day. Well, the thing is, we weren't really rich, so we didn't have cable, so after I got into their garage with the code, I figured I would just watch TV at their house for a little bit. After about 2 beers I got a crazy urge to go explore the house. First stop, Anna's room. Immediately when I went in there, I knew I had to rub one out, so I did. I opened her drawer and took out her clothing. I smelled it while going to town. When I was about to unload, I realized I didn't know where to release, so I decided the best course of action was to let it off inside the pillowcase. I admired my work and snooped the rest of her room and admired what I found. I found her diary and started scanning for my name. I found out that she has had thoughts about me, intimate thoughts. I found out what she likes. Over the next little while I used it to break her up with her boyfriend, and got her to fall for me. About 5 months after I had broken into her house, I was in it once again. This time with her, in her bed. The same bed I had rubbed one out in without her knowledge 5 months prior. What did someone tell you that really hurt? 2 years into an okay relationship, my girlfriend had shown no signs of dissatisfaction, and, while we had settled into a routine of work-school dating, we had fun. And one night, this happened. GF, hey, we have to talk. Me, we're going to be late for dinner with friends. GF, yeah, no. We're not going. I canceled. We need to talk. Me, okay. That sucks. What's wrong? GF, I met someone else. He's someone that came out of nowhere and he's everything I thought you were, but you're not. Me, processing, oh. There's a lot to unpack there. GF, I need to be honest with you and get it out. I've been unable to sleep, so I need to get this out. Me, hold on. Can we start with the meeting someone else part? GF, it's not important. Me, I disagree. GF, I'm not happy. You're not happy. We've been drifting for a while, now. Me, and yet this is the first conversation we're having about any of that. GF, sorry, I'll just come out and say I had a better offer. Like I said, I know what I want. He's it. You're not. I'm sorry. Me, have you been seeing him while we were still together? GF, I stopped thinking of us as together about a month ago. Me, and that's when it started? GF, sigh, I don't want to get into that. Me, you formed an emotional relationship with someone else and now you want out of ours. Okay. GF, are you mad? Me, I'm still in the processing phase of this. Shock is the best word. Nauseous? Sick and sad. GF, I mean, you were just working and we do the same thing every weekend and it doesn't seem to be going anywhere and, J, I don't have time for a silly artist who doesn't want to get a real job. I thought you were going to be a big success, but it's been 2 years and you're nowhere. Me, I'm still in college and I work. And I have had a relationship. We were. GF, my point. While you were working, he and I went out to the river and we took a walk on the bridge together. He told me his life plan and he told me he wanted me in it. It was so romantic. Me, this is so close to cheating there's no gap I can see between it and the line. GF, I haven't slept with him. Me, you kissed him, yes? GF, pause. Me, okay. GF, so I'm ending this because I want to be with him. I just picked the wrong man to be with and I wasted 2 years. So, it's not like we're both hurt by this. At this point, something popped under my temple and I unleashed a string of expletives so vile and loud that it frightened her into another room. I left.
The police found the world's most horrifying thing under my house. 26. That's how many bodies they found in the pit below my house. It was an earthquake that brought them to light. If not for that, I'm not sure I would have ever known they were down there. When the ground shifted, a putrid smell seeped up from below and permeated the entire house. Trying to locate the source, I shined my flashlight through the access hatch for the crawl space. That's when I saw an arm. A human arm, poking up through the dirt. Immediately, I called the police, and that's when my life turned into a circus. Nothing like this had ever happened in our small town before and the media had a field day. Investigators started to identify some of the bodies. Local news outlets dubbed them the alphabet murders. Strangely, they appeared to have met their ends in alphabetical order. One per year, spanning back 26 years. All women in their late teens and early 20s. Amanda Zeller was the last victim, Karen Abbott the first. Of course, my wife and I were the primary suspects. We'd been arrested and swabbed for DNA to test against forensic evidence they found under the house when the very first bodies were being unearthed. However, I knew they wouldn't find a trace of me or my wife down there. Neither of us had ever ventured below the house before. Though, I was sure they'd find a connection from me to who I knew to be the real killers. My parents. I had only inherited the house from my evil, abusive, pricks for parents a few months prior. This was after they'd lost control of their vehicle and driven off a cliff. Good riddance, was my first thought when I was informed of their deaths. I'd never been more than a punching bag for the both of them. Something to scream at, smack, and berate at home, then parade out in front of the neighbors as some perfect little child. Yeah, some perfect little family we had. It was all BS. They were a nightmare, so I ran away when I was 15 and never spoke with them again. Shockingly though, they left me the house. I figured maybe it was a final screw you to me when I saw the state of disrepair they left it in. At least it paid off, but it was going to need a lot of work if I was going to sell it for a good price. That's the only reason why I moved back in. And now I realize they weren't just assholes. They were sick, sadistic demons. Both of their DNA was all over Amanda Zeller. They'd done it all together. The most shocking part was though, that when they tested my DNA against my parents, it showed I wasn't a familial match. I wasn't their son. We were baffled, until they found an older grave, separate from the pit, that contained a young couple whose DNA did match mine. Their first victims.
How did you accidentally get your ex back in bed? I had just broken up with my girlfriend and I was reeling from the fact that she had dumped me for a guy I didn't like, a real jerk. I was at a ball game and saw them across the gymnasium of our high school, coupled up, holding hands. She looked at me, then looked away. He smirked. I got up to leave. It was a good game, but I wasn't into it. I went outside in the cool air. I felt like someone was following me. It was a girl I knew, who was in the class below me, a junior. She was about 18. I will call her Courtney. I thought she was fine, but she wasn't my type. She was too quiet and had a strange way of looking at the world. She was really friendly to me, though, and her best friend told me she liked me. Courtney had caught up with me and asked me why I was leaving. I told her about my ex and her jerk boyfriend. She really seemed to pity me. You know, I can be good company, she said, hopefully. I really looked at her for the first time. She was tall for a girl, almost as tall as me. She had shoulder length, sandy brown hair and freckles. She had a really great smile, with pale blue eyes. I don't know why I didn't notice her before. Suddenly she grabbed my arm and snuggled up to me. As she did, I felt warmth radiating from her body. It felt comforting. I noticed my ex and her BF coming out of the gymnasium. I knew they were following me to annoy me, probably his idea. She said, "Are they following you?" I said, "Isn't it obvious? No one is leaving the game. Let's get them back." She said, "How?" I observed my ex watching Courtney and me carefully. Her brow knitted in a frown. It dawned on me that my new friend had a great idea. "Okay," I said. Courtney mused, "I could pretend to kiss you." "No, that would not work. She would know we are trying to get back at her." Courtney then suggested that we fake me getting a blowjob. I was shocked to hear her say that. She was always so shy. How would we fake it? "We could go to your car and I could drop to my knees and do it." She is bound to believe it. Without another word we walked to my car, holding hands, and she reached over and kissed me in the mouth. Her lips were warm against the now snappy autumn air. I wouldn't mind having those lips somewhere else, I thought. Then I felt guilty because I had never even really noticed her before, and here I was picturing her as a SX object. When we got to her car, we kissed again, To make it look real, I opened the car door. We stood just inside of it. Then she dropped to her knees. She fumbled with the string on my sweats. I looked over to see my ex's mouth gaped open. Her boyfriend was pulling her arm, possibly trying to get her to go back inside. But she wouldn't budge. I knew I had her and really began to relish this unexpected revenge. I leaned my head back and closed my eyes. I made a few noises like I was being pleasured by Courtney. I could see the jerk boyfriend go back inside. My ex had her arms folded and just glared at me. Then, she started toward me. Courtney had been really getting into it, even bobbing back and forth, her head just visible over the car door. She was actually just softly bumping me repeatedly with her mouth. It was starting to feel good. Suddenly, the string on my sweats loosened and my sweats fell. My underwear was no protection against the cold air. My member began to swell with excitement, because I didn't know what Courtney was up to and because my ex was coming. I didn't say anything to Courtney, who pulled my underwear down, looking up to meet my eyes. She looked at my meat, which was now hard enough to nudge her lips. She put her lips on it, giving it a kiss while looking at me. She then put her entire mouth on it. Her warm lips and tongue felt so good. My ex had just reached the car. She stopped in her tracks as I looked over at her through glazed eyes. She looked at Courtney, who was oblivious to her presence. Then, she said softly, "But." Courtney slowly pulled her mouth off of my swollen sausage and said, "Yeah, it feels good to be his butt." She then put her mouth and hand back on me and sucked me deeply while looking straight at my ex. She had a little smile on her lips. "I didn't mean that," my ex said. Then she considered me. "You know, if you want 2 girls, I'll be happy to share you." I coolly remarked, "You can't share something you no longer possess." She wheeled suddenly and huffed back inside. Courtney sucked me faster until I came in her mouth. I had never finished so much. She could barely hold it all, but her blue eyes were smiling at me as she gulped my seed down. I helped her up and we kissed. Her mouth tasted like me. I pulled my pants up and she tied the string. We walked back into the gym, hand in hand. What is the most serious crime you have committed in an act of revenge? When I was in college, I decided to sell my car because I had just gotten a new one. However, a friend of mine got into trouble after using a counterfeit $20 bill at a store, and I had to bail him out. I spent a significant amount of money on his bail and a lawyer for him, so much so that I could no longer make the payments on my new car. A man I had recently met suggested that I rent my car to him. He proposed that he would make the monthly payments for a while since it would be cheaper for him than renting a car for a month, and I agreed. We wrote up a contract by hand. I took a photo of his driver's license, and he signed the contract. The guy pays the first month incorrectly, and I give him a warning. Second month is a late payment, so I get upset and let him know that I want my car back. Every attempt I made to contact the man and resolve the situation was futile. He would make excuses, claiming he was busy, at work, or out of town. Eventually, he admitted that he no longer had my car. He claimed that he could not make the payment, so he gave the car to someone else. However, I suspected he had actually sold my car, which seemed the more likely scenario. At this point, I'm going crazy trying to get my car back. He changed his number and no longer lives at the same address. His mom and sister do, but they claimed they had no idea where he was. The cops wouldn't do anything as it was apparently a civil matter, and all searches done by investigators turned up nothing useful except for new numbers that he kept on changing. Even a repo man that offered to help couldn't find it. The cops wouldn't do anything, the insurance company wouldn't do anything, and I really didn't want my credit turning to shit. So what did I do? I did the craziest and possibly stupidest thing imaginable. I got his social security number, took out a loan in his name to pay off the car, took out various credit cards in his name, rented out an apartment in his name, and threw a massive party at the new apartment. I left halfway through in case cops showed up. I screwed him over pretty bad. You don't mess with me like that, not after you make me go seriously broke and attempt to ruin my credit. Uber drivers, what's the craziest pickup you've ever done? On this one night, I received a very strange request for a ride. The request came in, and everything seemed normal. He was 3 miles away, according to his request. As I'm driving to the pickup location, I get a phone call. It's my passenger. Basically he says, "Hey man, I'm not actually at that location. I just had to put that so someone could come get me. I'm too far away from any other drivers, so the app made me put my location in your city, closer to other drivers. Come pick me up at my drop-off location." This is okay with me, because I'm getting paid to go pick him up. To my surprise, he lives over an hour away. Score, this is about to be easy money. About an hour and a half passes, and I roll up to a small little house in a decent area. I text my passenger, "Hey man, this is your driver. I'm outside." "Cool, I'll be out in a second." Out walks a guy, 23 years old, really handsome guy. He could have been a model. Thick brown hair, scruffy facial hair, nice smile, everything. Charismatic and outgoing as well. He has an open bottle of liquor in one hand, and Sprite in the other as he walks to my car. Knowing this is against the law, I'm hesitant to let him in my car. But, I drove over an hour to pick this guy up, so I wasn't about to turn him away because of his drink. He asks me if we can run into an ATM really quickly. I oblige, so gets to the ATM. He gets $10 cash. He gets back in the car, and takes a swig of his liquor, the bottle 3/4 full at this point. I ask him where he wants me to take him tonight. Atlanta. It's not a great part of town that we're going in, but just trust me man, it's all going to be okay. I promise. I'm calm man, don't worry about that. We hit the road. Atlanta is 2 hours away from where we are at this point. It's a long ride, so we begin talking. I learn a lot about him. He's drunk. He drinks every day, so his drunken state is actually incredibly coherent. He's really smart. Former UGA student. Wanted to be a doctor. Dropped out of school. He's now homeless, addicted to drugs, low self-esteem, doesn't know what to do with his life. He is a self-proclaimed F-up. I find all of this to be interesting. I tend to be decent with people who are troubled in life, so I do what I can to try to talk to this kid. I want to help him. I want to relate to him, to get through to him. He clearly has his hands full with life. I ask him, what's your favorite thing in the world to do? Like, you have 24 hours to do this one thing. What do you do? Heroin. Okay, let's spin the wheel again. Not quite the answer I was looking for. I like heroin, man. Video games too, but mainly heroin. Do you think you have a problem? Not really. I've been to rehab twice before, but I've never done it for myself. I only went because other people made me. I see. I get a feel for this guy. He continues drinking his bottle. I'm going to get arrested if I get pulled over with this guy drinking this bottle in my car. F it. Let's keep driving. I've come this far with him. Why not? Pull over. I have to pee. Bruh, can you wait like 10 minutes? I'm not about to stop on the highway for you to pee. Let me get to a gas station. Alright, but hurry. We're laughing at this point. He's drunk but still coherent, and I'm driving 90 on the highway so this guy won't pee in my car. Having a good time, enjoying each other's company. Right before I get to the gas station, he accidentally spills his Sprite in my new car. This is where I began to see firsthand his low self-esteem. When he spilled his Sprite, he started cursing himself, talking about how he always F's everything up, about how he can never do anything right. He makes things worse for everyone. I assure him that he's okay. I tell him I'll clean it when we get to the gas station. We arrive. I tell him to go to the bathroom. I clean the spilled drink. No harm, no foul. No big deal. When he comes out, I tell him everything is okay, and the car is as good as new. He's still a little upset, but he gets over it. Back on the road to Atlanta, we talk politics, religion, and some other things. He passes out in my front seat from his liquor. He tells me to wake him up when we get to Atlanta. Alright brother, we're here. Now where? This is where things get interesting. And I mean interesting. He navigates me to a ghetto, run-down, dark apartment. There are cops at every corner in this city, and I'm not exaggerating. Just to give you an idea of how bad this part of town is, he tells me, I'm going to run inside. I'll be out in 3 minutes. Please, do not leave me here. Please. I'm begging you. I know it's scary here, but please don't leave me in this part of town. After this, you can leave me wherever you want. But please don't leave me here. I have no idea what we're doing at this terrible place, but I found myself here at 4 a.m. with this guy. He gets out of my car, and runs to the 3rd story of the apartment. 2 minutes goes by, and he's right back out in my car. Alright man, we can go now. What the hell was that about, man? I had to buy my drugs. Ready? What did you buy? Heroin. I just drove this guy 2 hours to a crack house. I'm gonna effing die tonight. I'm gonna die. We pull out of the dark parking lot. I'm just back into the main street, and he tells me to pull over to the side of the road. I oblige. He gets out, runs into the woods, and comes back with a bag. He grabbed his needles. This kid is now sitting in my front seat with heroin. He takes off his shoe and sock, ties his shoelaces around his ankle. He inserts the needle into his foot. This man is using heroin while I'm driving my car. At any second, he could stab me with this needle, drug me, and kill me. I am going to get effing thrown in prison with this guy. I'm transporting drugs. Wow. F it. I've gone this far with this kid. I'm not backing out now. I've got to do something. I'm gonna help this kid. How much did you just buy? $10 worth. Why? Listen man, you've got a problem. You just spent $175 in rides to get to Atlanta, for $10 worth of drugs. Do you see the problem here? He stays silent. The heroin kicks in almost immediately. He's drowsy as hell, incoherent at this point, trying to stay awake. He injected more than he realized, and his heart is slowing. He assures me he's not going to die. Yeah, please don't die. That'd be great if you didn't die right now. He lets out a little laugh. He's about to pass out, but he tells me to take him to a gas station. I take him to the one he requested. He gets out of my car, and stumbles into the woods at the gas station. I am watching his every move, seeing if he is going to rob this gas station, or whatever it is he is doing. He starts digging in the ground, like a dog who is making a hole. He's digging for about 3 solid minutes, then he makes his way back to my car. He found his crack that he had last week, when he thought the cops were following him. He then buys vinegar at the gas station. He then dilutes his crack rock in the vinegar, and starts shooting up crack into his foot in my car. Take me to the hospital. I need to go to rehab. Seriously? Yes, you're right. I'm addicted. When you told me how much I spent on the ride to buy my drugs, that was a wake-up call. At this point, he's on the verge of tears. And so am I. I take him to the hospital. On the way there, he starts crying. You've been a better friend to me than anyone I've ever known. Why? I don't get it. There must be a reason that you were the one who was sent to pick me up tonight. It's a sign. I don't know who you are, but you've been a better friend to me tonight than I've ever had in my life. Why are you helping me? I'm a F up. You should have left me hours ago. I'm crying while driving this guy. I don't know why I do these things, man. I just care about you. I want you to get better. Thanks. Nobody has ever cared. We get to rehab at the hospital. I walk in to check this guy in. He stays in the car. I tell the receptionist what's going on. I'm an Uber driver. There is a guy in my car right now who is strung out on crack and heroin. He needs to go to rehab. Whoa, what's going on? Let me come see what's going on. The receptionist follows me to my car, along with the effing policeman, who was sitting next to him at the front desk. The cop is a huge dick at this point. He tells my passenger to get out of my car and put his hands up. After searching him, He tells him to gather his paraphernalia, needles and whatnot, and he takes him inside. Officer tells me to follow. He is interrogating the kid, just relentlessly questioning him, and the kid is crying. He keeps saying, "I don't want to go back to jail. I just want help. I don't want to do this anymore." I step in and pretty much tell the officer to chill out, and quit intimidating the guy. The officer then pulls me aside and threatens to arrest me. He backs off the kid, and starts interrogating me, telling me that I'm just as guilty as he is, and that I should be in prison right now. During his interrogation with me, the passenger says that I know nothing. I'm just an Uber driver. After my passenger mentions that, the officer tells me to get the hell out of there. I left. As a teacher, have you ever caught your students doing something inappropriate? I teach at a Catholic middle school, so our standards for appropriate behavior are pretty high. Technically, a student telling another student to shut up counts as inappropriate for us, and I'd have to discipline that student if I heard it. The most inappropriate thing I've ever caught a student doing, that would be inappropriate even by public school standards, happened about 5 years ago. I was proctoring a standardized test near the end of the school year. All of the 8th graders had already been accepted into their high schools, and they just didn't care about the standardized test or anything else having to do with school at that point. This particular test session was an hour long, and students were not allowed to read a book or draw or do anything else once they were finished with their tests. The idea is to prevent students from rushing through the test to get back to a book they're reading. The 8th graders rushed through the test anyway, because they just didn't care. One student literally put his name on his paper and turned it in with all of the answers blank. He'd been a discipline problem for the 2 years I taught him, and I was happy he was about to move on to high school. He turned in his answer sheet before I even sat down from passing out everyone's tests, smiled at me, returned to his seat, and put his head on his desk. I wasn't allowed to say anything to him or encourage him to try harder or anything. He asked if he could sit in an unoccupied corner seat for the rest of the time, and I agreed. I was happy he was taking a nap and wasn't going to distract others. Or so I thought. About 15 minutes later, as I was walking around, monitoring everyone else who was still taking the test, I looked in his direction. His head was down and his hoodie was pulled over his head, but there was no mistaking what was going on. He was wearing sweatpants, and his hand was down them. He was playing with himself in the back of the classroom during a standardized test. I didn't want to make a scene, because I didn't want to disturb the students who were focused on the test. I had two options: tell him to stop, and risk him making a scene. Ignore it and tell his parents later. I went with option 2. After the test, I emailed the parents and CC'd my boss, explaining exactly what had happened with him not doing the test, and what he did afterwards. The mother apologized. My boss said I did the right thing. The kid didn't look me in the eyes for the next 3 weeks I taught him. What is your darkest secret? So I'm about 16, and I always go down to this bank to take money out. I only had a savings account, so I didn't have an ATM card at the time. There was always this cute chick working there. She'd always smile and greet me, and I'd always try to go to her line. As she was a bank teller, I only saw her sitting down. This is important later. One day, I just work up all the confidence I can and I ask her out as I'm taking out some money. She said yes. So we set up a time around the weekend for me to come over and pick her up. She gives me her number, I get her address, and I skip home as happy as can be. So it's the weekend, and I drive up to her house in my little beat-up Honda. I knock on her door and her dad answers. A split second of oh crap comes over me, but he just gives me this heartwarming smile and invites me into this house. I instantly feel at ease and we go sit down in the living room. Her dad is all happy like I'm so glad you're taking my daughter out and I really appreciate it and all this craziness. So I'm starting to think to myself, oh what have I gotten myself into? So her dad reaches into his pocket and pulls out a set of car keys. He says I want you to take my car. I said no, that's okay, I have my car. He's all like no, practically forcing the keys into my hand. Still keeping his big smile on his face. No sooner does he give me the keys than do I hear from up the stairs, BZZ, no crap, she's in a wheelchair. A split second of shallow human being comes over me, but I think about it and say to myself I can do this. She's awesome and has a great personality, screw it. We go outside, and I realize why her dad wanted me to take his truck. It was all rigged up with the belts and harnesses and the door that came all the way out for the wheelchair. So I took his truck, and we head to the movies. Best part? The handicap spot. So we're in the theater, and no sooner does the movie start, than she starts putting her hands on my junk. That's totally cool with me. We start making out almost during the whole movie. My parents are out of town that weekend, so I ask her if she wants to come back to my place. She says yes, so we get back in her dad's truck and we're on the way to my house. We arrive at my house. I have stairs, so I have to carry her inside. Thankfully my room is on the first floor, so I get her inside, throw her, and we start going at it. When all of a sudden I hear a pop and her leg comes off. She's got a fake leg. How did I miss that? Keep going, she screams as I pull her leg and throw that across the room. Guys who actually bought the
You won't last 5 minutes playing this game.
Game from the ads from Pork. What was it? What happened? Was it a scam? I got curious with the same question one day, so I input fake credit card info from that fake name generator website into a few of those sites. From what I can tell, this is what they do: steal pornographic content from artists and sites to use on their scam site and for ridiculous eye-catching ads. Lead site visitors with false promises and ask for credit card info. If credit card info is obtained, usually an error screen will pop up saying something to the extent of sorry, we're scheduled for maintenance or our site is having problems. Please check back later. which is just to cover up the fact that there is no site and it's all a front to trick you into giving them your credit card info. They are an absolute cancer, and any pork site that allows ads from these vile scammers are scumbags. Looking at you, P-Hub, what is the most illegal thing you have ever gotten away with? In high school, we had this tight-knit clique of friends. Everyone in our group was absolute best friends. Ride or die type of guys. We hung out all the time, shared stories of the girls we had been with, got drunk together, and so on. One night one of our buddies Jay hits us up in our group chat saying he had just bought a new car with the help of his parents and asked if we all wanted to cruise. A lot of our buddies opted out as it was finals week. I said, yeah man, let's do it. My buddy D also said that he was in. Lo and behold, Jay arrives in a very nice, very fast car, and I hop in as we head off to pick up D. We pick up D around 11 that night and spend some time doing our typical activities, chiefing, drinking, cruising around town revving his car, racing people from red lights, and flirting with every hot girl we came across. Now because this car was a two-seater, we had put D in the trunk, he could still see everything just fine as the trunk was not separate from the main portion of the vehicle. We were having fun screeching to stops, drifting corners, and slamming him around back there. After a few hours, we get bored. We start cruising down a highway to head to a suburb of our town just to see what's going on there. Jay was talking the entire way about how he had no clue of what the top speed on his car was. He told us the governor had been removed. I looked at him and said, nobody is out here man, just punch the gas and find out, and he does. We're driving like hell on this 4-lane highway blazing past what little traffic there is. D and I are taking videos laughing it up as Jay is calling out speeds. 130. 135. 140. Right as he said 140, I turned my camera to focus on a sign because they went by so fast and I wanted to show everyone how fast we were going. Right underneath that sign, to my horror, was a police officer clocking traffic. We absolutely blow by him. D must have seen him as well because before I could get a word he starts freaking out. At this moment, a long way behind us, the lights flick on and Jay sees him as well. Jay starts panicking as I try to stay calm and dictate the situation to him. At this point, we were pushing 150. Jay is freaking out screaming, dude, what do I do? What do I do? In all of my infinite wisdom, I yell out, keep your foot on that gas until we hit a back road turn off. This was it, we were truly running from the cops. We had done it before but never alone. It was always house parties that had been busted, you know, the kind where 3 cops walk in and 50 drunk kids run in every direction. This was far from that. We were a target rather than a busted up party. Jay yells out for one of us to hook up the police scanner to his aux cord. D jumps onto his app as I was already on my Maps app giving Jay directions. Immediately through the stereo we hear, all available units respond, I am in pursuit of a vehicle moving at a very high rate of speed. At that moment my heart sank even further. This was really happening. I tell Jay to start slowing down as there was a turnoff ahead of us that led to a winding mess of country roads. We must have torn half of the tread off of his tires around that right-hand turn at 45. I inform him that this road runs straight for a mile or so and then ends in a T-type turn. He guns it. I could barely hear the panicked voice of D over the engine. We are jetting down this 2-lane road through the middle of nowhere at 120. His headlights hit the sign ahead informing us the road was ending. The tires screech as I yell out left. 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 We screamed around the corner at a ridiculous speed and take off again. After a half mile or so we realized that there had been no red and blue lights behind us since we turned off that main highway. Jay immediately slows down to the allowed 55 miles per hour speed limit. Everyone in that vehicle lets out a huge sigh of relief. At this point, we were keen to hear what they were saying on the police radio. Silence. D's phone had died. We have never scrambled so fast to get another phone plugged into that aux cord as we did that night. As we were hooking it up, D shouts from the back, guys get ready, I see headlights. At this point, Jay and I had fallen into a trance of stupidity. I called back to D saying, yeah dude, just a farmer out cruising. They'd have their lights on if it was a cop, especially the same one that was chasing us before. Not 20 seconds later D screams, it's a cop, he's still on us. It's a cop. I was laughing at him, calling out to him and mocking him, yeah right dude, you're paranoid, just chill. He was insistent that this was a cop. I said, look dude, if that's a cop they'd be all over the scanner right now, it's completely silent. I looked down at my phone and realized my volume was off. I turned it up, and the first words I heard sunk my heart even further. I'm on him, he's traveling southbound. Waiting on backup to close in on the driver, I do not have plates yet. Those last words were a godsend. I look at Jay who was panicked out of his mind and scream, no plates. Hit that gas pedal. The next thing I know it's panic both in the car and on the police scanner. We were going 145, 150 at times down a dark 2-lane road. D was screaming expletives repeatedly. Over the scanner, the officer was screaming they're running again. I'm losing them. I'm losing them. We ended up in an area where I had some knowledge of the roads. I was directing Jay this time without a map, just vague estimates. Somehow, through a winding course of high-speed turns and even faster straights, we hear over the scanner I have completely lost them, last seen southbound. This made me the most relieved to hear, not only was he not behind us. He hadn't gotten our plates, and we happened to be heading north. After a couple of miles of clenching worry, I tell him, look man, they are setting up a perimeter for us. Just listen to the radio, there's no way we are going to make it back to town without getting caught. Both D and Jay agreed with me, and I directed Jay to a lake road which was way off from any main road. It pained me to hear the dirt, gravel, and potholes of that road banging up Jay's car as we crept down it, all lights off. We made it about 7 miles back, which took almost 45 minutes, and put the car off the road into the woods. We sat out drinking what alcohol we had left. It was a much needed relief. The next day we cautiously drove back home. We cruised 1 mile per hour under the limit, signaling at every movement, and doing everything just right. We were tailed by 4 different cops that morning. They had to have known it was us. Each one followed us for several miles. We knew we couldn't run. It was broad daylight, they now had our plates, and there was heavy traffic. Never once did we get stopped. They didn't get our plates when we ran. Although it may have been obvious we were the runners from the night before, they were not able to do anything about it. In our minds we were geniuses. We all fabricated a story that we had just come from a friend's house down south and were heading to the mall in town, that we were all home last night. We never needed it. Thank God.